And joining us now to talk more about this poll is Siena College pollster Steve Greenberg. Nice to see you again.
Good to be with you, Liz.
So this strikes me as a throw the spaghetti at the wall poll. That's what I said earlier, because you've got a lot in here. See what sticks. And what stands out for you the most?
Well, first of all, I like to think of it as a potpourri, looking at a variety of different issues and how voters feel about them.
We are not branding the poll. We're merely discussing it.
Okay. I think what stands out is sort of a continuation from Election Day. Look, this election was a fiscal, economic, jobs election. We've seen elections in the past that were education or crime. This was fiscal, economy, jobs, and it continues. Nearly two-thirds of voters think the state is headed in the wrong direction. Nearly two-thirds of voters think that the country is headed in the wrong direction, and it's all about how they're feeling economically. They're feeling the pinch. So I think what the main message here for Andrew Cuomo as governor-elect is focus on the economy, focus on the budget, focus on job creation. We asked voters if Andrew Cuomo could only address one issue in his inaugural address, what should it be? 44% of voters said revitalizing the state's economy. 22% said resolving the state's budget problems. So two-thirds of voters say focus on an economic issue.
You know what's interesting about that is that we're not actually receiving a lot of details about Andrew Cuomo's inauguration. At this time last year, we knew, or last year, excuse me, last governor, I should say, we knew that Eliot Spitzer was going to do this outside, historic sort of inauguration. We knew he was going to run in the park at the crack of dawn with a whole pack of reporters following him, me being one of them. So, I mean, we knew that he was doing all these things. We have not gotten a lot of details from Andrew Cuomo. We have, however, heard that he's probably going to do something low-key. And that fits with the whole austerity message, does it not?
No question. Look, I mean, this is not a time. Remember George Pataki's inaugural, his first inaugural in 1995, where they rented out the Times Union Center, back then the Pepsi Center in Albany, and spent millions of dollars. I think the public
not taxpayer dollars, though, we should know. He raised that money, but he did come under fire for it.
Absolutely. But, I mean, I think the public would be outraged if Andrew Cuomo tried to do that. And I think Andrew Cuomo's a smart enough politician to realize that the voters would be outraged.
But what's interesting here also is that he's viewed favorably by 66% of voters and unfavorably by 25%. More than three-quarters of Democrats and nearly two-thirds of independents are for him, but Republicans, while a slim plurality of them support him, they're not psyched on the way that he is actually conducting himself in his limbo period.
That's right. I mean, we did two questions about Andrew Cuomo. One was the standard favorable, unfavorable, and as you said, 66%. And there, Republicans, a small plurality, it's virtually dead even, but a small plurality have a favorable view of him, 47 to 45. And in fact, his pickup overall statewide this month from last month was mainly due to Republicans, because last month Republicans 39 favorable, 51 unfavorable. So Republicans are warming up a little bit to him. But then we asked sort of a weird question, and I will confess that it was my doing that we threw this one in, was sort of a job performance question. Even though he doesn't really have a job, per se. He's the governor-elect. What is the job of governor-elect?
Well, what is the job of governor-elect?
Well, we left that up to the voters, and we said in the months since Election Day, how do you think he's doing in preparing to be governor? And what we found is 43% of voters said he's doing an excellent or good job. 39% said he's doing only a fair or poor job. But what we saw there was a real split between Democrats and Republicans. 55% of Democrats say excellent or good. 57% of Republicans say only fair or poor.
Well, why do we think that is? Because they're not completely sold on him? Or?
I think part of it is the fact that we haven't heard a lot. You just said, we haven't heard a lot from Andrew Cuomo in the months since election. Look, here we are 3 weeks out from when he's going to become governor, less than 3 weeks at this point. He made his first staff announcements last week. We still don't know a single commissioner that's going to be part of the new administration. He hasn't laid out the groundwork of what he is going to do. What are his top priorities going to be in the first week, 2 month,
well, the budget, assumedly. I mean, we expect the budget, right?
But basically, every time you and your colleagues ask the governor-elect or his staff a question about how are you going to do this or what's your position on that, they say, see the campaign books and what we put out during the campaign. So I think what we're seeing is that Andrew Cuomo's trying to sort of set the surprise game. I mean, what he wants to do is come out fresh on an inaugural, followed 5 days later by a State of the State
address.
But there
are interesting reports, and I agree with you, that he wants to wait to do the broad brush stuff. But there are interesting reports about quiet talks that he is having prior to getting into office with, for example, just today there's a story in the Times about his property tax cap effort.
Right.
He's slowly getting people together behind closed doors, talking to the teachers union, who's predisposed against, talking to the Assembly Democratic leadership, who's also predisposed against, and the Republicans who are predisposed for, but trying to get these coalitions together quietly so maybe he could roll it out and say, ta-da, I'm here, here's my agreement, right?
Exactly, and you see the same thing on health care and Medicaid.
Yep.
We know that he's had talks with 1199 SEIU. We know he's, as you said, he's talking a lot to the Assembly Democrats. He's also talking a lot to the Senate Republicans. I think he's being very smart in the sense that he is trying to show that he is not Eliot Spitzer, who came in a really bad way 4 years ago, fighting with everyone. Now, economic times are much worse. Cuomo's facing a much more difficult fiscal picture than Spitzer faced 4 years ago, but I think he's smarter in terms of the way he's trying to deal with it and lay the groundwork for it. We also have the factor that he's hired Drew Zambelli on the inside. That was one of the announcements last week. And we know that John Marino and Bill Cunningham on the outside, he's already working on the campaign to counteract the feedback he's going to get when he unveils his budget.
So back to the poll, you asked this interesting, the way you got out at this was interesting. How would voters decide if they had the chance to be state senators and cast a vote? And some of this is, you know, you would expect. Property tax cap, people are excited about allowing wine to be sold in grocery stores. That went down under the Patterson administration. 59% support it. Legalizing medical marijuana. What's interesting, though, is all of the top possible cuts. Medicaid, and education, 29% and 23% supporting, respectively, versus 68% and 74% against.
And let me add to that, even Republicans and self-described conservatives oppose cutting education and health care. And look, you know, Liz, we at Siena have done this series of questions a number of different ways, worded it differently, and always come up with essentially the same results. Voters, and in this case, we should point out to the viewers how we worded it. We said reducing state aid to education by $1 billion to help close the state's $9 billion budget deficit. Even then, to close the budget deficit, which voters want the governor to do, they're opposed overwhelmingly to cutting education. Look, voters really would love the state to close the budget deficit by eliminating cars, drivers, and cell phones.
Sure.
But the truth of the matter is 2/3 of this money in the state budget goes to health care and education. If they're going to balance the budget without raising taxes, which the governor-elect says is what he wants to do, then they've got to make cuts to education and health care. 2
quick points in closing. The first is, one good thing for Andrew Cuomo is that he's got a very high approval rating, while the legislative leaders, if anybody even knows who they are, not so much. The one that they actually know is Shelley Silver, the Assembly Speaker. His favorability is 22. 42 is the negative. 22 is the positive. That's good for Andrew Cuomo because he's got a bully pulpit, of course.
Although, in fairness, I mean, the legislative leaders are largely unknown, except for the Speaker. But the Speaker has been Speaker for 16 years. But also, the Speaker doesn't have to worry about a statewide constituency.
Right.
He has to worry about a lower Manhattan constituency.
And I just want to point out, and unfortunately we're out of time, but Governor Patterson's numbers not so great.
No, they've been bad for a year and a half. They're consistently bad, and unfortunately for Governor Patterson, he's leaving state office, leaving the governorship on a very low note, and he can only hope that time will be kind to him.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Steve Greenberg.
Thank you,
have
Liz.
been kind to us for coming in. Thanks.
Appreciate it.